Yeah. God, it's freezing here.
Now, you seem to be the man that, potentially, that no one's really spending a lot of time with today. Why is that?
Anti-Semitism.
Is that right?
I don't know. I'm usually behind the scenes, deep behind the scenes. But, sometimes I come out of my cave just to chat.
Now, you're a very important man in this process.
My mother thinks so. Yes.
Yeah.
My mother thinks so. Yes, I'm involved with all of our things. Yeah.
So can you just explain for our audience within the fan community, because we're associated with Austrek, which is one of the local fan clubs, and it's actually the second oldest fan club in the world.
Is that true?
That is true.
Is that true? What's the
1976.
Jesus. What was the first one?
Starfleet International.
Yeah.
Is that true? Where are they out of?
Out of America.
They're out of the States. Yeah, and they were sort of like an amalgamation of a whole lot of people who were just fans, and then they became this one entity.
Got it. Were you guys there last night or the day before?
No, we were there last night.
But you didn't see it until last night?
No, last night was the first time.
Last night.
Do we screw it up?
No, that was awesome.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay. It was weird for us last night because it was the first time we really showed it to people we did not know at all.
Yeah.
So it was a...
Well, we spoke to those who are the fans of the more recent Trek, and to also some of our friends who are the fans of the 60s original,
right? And
they're not fans of any of the new stuff, and they walked away enjoying the movie.
Both of them.
I was sitting down the front in the second row, and this fellow was sitting in the front row, and he is TOS original series fan only.
Right.
And he came to me at the end of the film, and he leaned across. Because we've been chatting about it at the beginning, he leaned across and he said, "That was great. That was great." So I think, anecdotally, one person, look, it's a good endorsement, but I think if you can get that sort of endorsement...
I was the one of the five of us who were originally involved, Damon, Alex, Bob, JJ, and myself. I was one who knew the least about the series. In fact, I didn't watch the series at all, and I wasn't really introduced to it until the film franchise came on, and then I always felt out of touch. I didn't know, when I would watch the series as a kid, I didn't know really how these people were. I just felt stupid. And I just felt like, all these people were sitting around a bridge and they're talking about gibberish, and it's like I don't know who they are or whatever. And then when I saw Star Wars, there was like a beginning for me. There was, you meet this kid Luke, and he has his aunt and uncle, and they die, and he's like there. So you kind of get pulled into it. So when the movie came out, a couple of years after Star Wars, I was like, wow, it's another big space movie, whatever. Exactly. So I went to see it, and I remember sitting in the audience and like loving the spectacle. Like it was enormous and it was big, and the Goldsmith music came on. It was like everything was like I was in heaven. And I remember the theater I was at in Westwood. It was like Westwood in Los Angeles, and the whole experience was a very seminal experience for me. And simultaneously, I remember everyone in the audience cheering when these characters came on, and that's where I felt like, why are they cheering? Who are these people? And again, you realize that there was never a beginning for Star Trek, and there was never a way in. And by the time I saw Wrath of Khan, I kind of knew who these people were from the previous film. So I had, and I loved Wrath of Khan, but it felt like I kind of surrounded myself with these people that I discovered in the first film. But I never really had a gateway into it in the same way, and that was kind of like at the beginning when we started talking about the franchise, which is immediately, or about taking on the film, I should say, we immediately... Damon and Alex and Bob and JJ, they were all there from the point of view of this is the best way in. Let's do in all the filmed entertainment they had never done. The origins of Kirk and Spock, and for me, it was instantly like, yeah, who are these guys? And I knew he was a Vulcan, but I never knew who was an Earthling. Like that was all news to me, and all this stuff. And by the way, I've seen before my involvement in this film, I'd seen not all 10 films, but I would say 8 of the 10. Like I saw a lot of them. And all that time, I never knew any of that about Spock. Like, I didn't know, maybe it might have been mentioned, but I never landed with me. So that was kind of what excited us about this, which was, if we do our job right, it would appeal to all those 40 years of people who had all been fans of Star Trek, either all of it or certain ones or part of them, but it all kind of goes back to, that Kirk and Spock beginning, and if we could start there and make it work. And then appeal to people like me who know nothing and feel like the dumbest guy in the room, which really doesn't take much.
So, just moving away from talking about the story itself, in terms of being a producer for this on behalf of, JJ, the company, what do you do? What do you actually do? What's the mechanics of what you do?
Well, I'm involved in everything we produce and everything we do, and I do different things on different projects at all times. In our first season of Lost, I was responsible for all of our cuts and all of our mixes. Now I mostly just focus on the mixes and the dubs. On Star Trek, obviously we're involved in putting the conception of it, and when they were writing the script and the casting, and then involved in production. Then I vanished a little because in the middle of Fringe I would have to go off. We were trying to do that pilot in Toronto, and I came back and was helpful during the editing process, as well as, again, the mixing and the post and the sound and all that other stuff, let alone the marketing. It's kind of everything. I mean, someone asked me this recently, and I find you're just particularly a good producer, not being myself, but the people I model myself after are kind of involved in everything and just helping their director, or in the case of television, their showrunners, do everything they can to kind of free them up to be able to do their jobs as best as they can, and to help clear the way for any of their creativity.
So how do you go with going from both producing the TV series and doing movies at the same time, that everything's simultaneous?
It's weird. I'll tell you, it's exhausting and mind-numbingly exciting at the same time. I mean, going back and forth, but it's weird. They're exactly the same process, just done completely differently. Just economically, they're different, and the speed of everything is different, and just bouncing around. And part of our success, I think, in features has really been a television education. We were able to do things so much faster with so significantly smaller amounts of money, and the ability to problem solve on the fly and to be able to do it. And I think we've had success in features, or at least in making films, I should say, that we've been happy with, okay, in the sense that, every challenge is addressable, but you have to kind of, roll up your sleeves and figure out how to do it, which all goes back to our making movies when we were kids, and let's figure out how we can do it. And that's all. That's the fun, making movies and TV.
Yeah. And with this film in particular, with the Star Trek film, what were the biggest challenges in terms of hurdles, in terms of getting this thing up and getting it made?
Well, to say we had the greatest crew is an understatement. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, the whole movie was shot in Los Angeles, and we had big conversations about going to Iceland and this, and it just starts getting really expensive to start moving people around. So then it all becomes, well, what can we do? And ILM, who did the visual effects, to say that they did an incredible job is the understatement of the year. I probably just said that 3 times, but it's the truth. I mean, they're incredible. And the real challenge was, what we like to do is make things, and in everything we do, is that there's something tangible to make it feel real and not just visual effects. And in a movie where it's all in outer space, obviously it's all visual effects. But the idea was to make it tangible and real. And so while obviously a good percentage of the movie is shot on sound stages, like the bridge of the Enterprise or the Kelvin or any of the different spaceships, a lot of it was not shot there. We found practical locations, and we shot in different factories or this. And in fact, the hull of the engine room of the Enterprise was all shot at a Budweiser factory in Los Angeles, and what we fell in love with is when we went inside, it was it's working. It's it's a full functioning, perfectly operated brewery, but it's enormous and it's spotless, okay, which is what felt perfect for the Enterprise. The Enterprise is brand spanking new in our film. So you see these scenes of them running around inside this space, and suddenly you have this scope and this feel of how big this ship really is. I mean, the length of it is of the Enterprise in reality is supposed to be as long as the Empire State Building on its side. It's really big. To capture that kind of scope, we wanted to film in real locations and mix our visual effects in with practical practical as you can be, and that's kind of what's the challenge, was always kind of making complete science fiction real.
In terms of the actual production design of the film, there are some departures, and obviously the story allows for those departures, but when you were going through the conceptual part of the movie and imagining what this could be like, was there a conscious decision by either JJ or yourself or any of the senior production team about just how far you might veer away from what had been previously established, or did you allow the designers to go away and reimagine and then come back?
Well, we really focused on the original series. I mean, that was kind of the jumping off point, and discovered things along the way. Like, for example, the colored outfits, which were so iconic in the series, had strangely never been in any of the films. Nobody had gone back to it, which instantly made us excited about doing something different. And Michael Kaplan, who was our costume designer, who came aboard, his first film he worked on as costume designer was Blade Runner. So we're like, oh, we're in good hands. And his approach to doing Blade Runner was this idea of, like, obviously going back to like the film noir and of the old film noir movies. Kind of that absolutely, and that idea. Well, his approach on this film was to look at that kind of 60s, but not to look at it from what the costumes were, but to look at fashion of the 60s, and like Pierre Cardin and different people who were like great, fashion designers of the time. And he applied that to making it. So if you look at the stuff, there's kind of a timelessness to it that feels like retro without being retro, and that was kind of the idea, which is, same thing, which is Scott Chambliss, our production designer, would go back and look at the Enterprise and how do we make it familiar. That was always the idea, is to make it feel familiar, but not reinventing the wheel. Like, make it all feel modern and rich and full. And it's the same thing when you watch that original Enterprise. It's still the same shape, everything's there, but they obviously didn't have the same budget when doing the original TV series, so the walls were like, they didn't have the same ability to add all the buttons and the lights and everything that would be there. It was much simpler. Okay, so the idea was just to do whatever you can to make it feel familiar and be that place. And the origins of that, or conversation of that, was JJ had pointed out when he went to go see Phantom Menace, there was this great experience of like sitting in the audience, and we went to like early on. We like everyone who's probably on the website went as early as possible to go see that movie, and how exciting it was, and it was palpable. And so the movie starts, and the Fox logo comes on, everyone cheers, and the Lucas logo, and everyone cheers, and Star Wars, and all the right things are happening, and then the movie starts, and everything's going along, and then all of a sudden they cut to a hallway, okay, and nothing was there. It was just like a hallway, but it was so familiar that there was like this eruptive applause in the audience, okay, over a hallway, and it was like. That was kind of the idea, bringing back that familiarity from something from 40 years ago and kind of make it your own, but still let it be something that, fans would be able to go back to and say, oh, I remember that from so long ago, because all these other incarnations of the series, they kept evolving, but they kept moving further away from what was the original one and kind of creating their own. So we thought, let's go back to the original and feel like how we can make that new.
Gene Roddenberry spoke about the original cast in terms of catching lightning in a bottle. And then he spoke about the Next Generation cast about catching lightning in a bottle. And he said it was very rare to have done that twice under the banner of Star Trek. And it would appear as though that you guys have managed to do it with the cast that you've put into this film and you've got in those key roles. The biggest challenge is, and based on very early internet reviews, that you guys have got a hit on your hands. And I the sound of knocking wood. And I think you might already know that you've got a hit on your hands regardless. It's a great film. It's entertaining, and it hits all the right notes for the fans, but it also hits all the right notes for the general audience. And you appear to have caught that lightning in the bottle. Where do you go to from here?
Well, look, from your mouth to the film goers' ears. I mean, hopefully people go see it. You never know. We do know it's a movie, obviously, we're really excited and proud of. And to all of our casting is purely, we have no one more to thank than April Webster and Alyssa Weisberg, who, they did our casting for us on our Lost pilot, where, again, talking about lightning in a bottle. I mean, that was a show that was put together so quickly and under the gun. And if you would listen to the experts at the time, everybody was like, "You're screwed. Like, all the good actors have already been cast in other pilots, and we're behind the gate. We're behind the the 8 ball, da da da." And make a long story short, I think our cast has always been just really spectacular on Lost, and we've been very lucky there. And again, this was one of those situations where JJ had said this to me early on when I started working with him. He was like, "You're going to know," which always sounded like Hollywood gibberish to me. And sure enough, like Evangeline Lilly walked in, we knew. And we had the same experience going through casting on Star Trek, where we were lucky to find Zach early on. We knew him, we had mutual friends, all of us were friends, we were producers on Heroes, and we were a fan of Heroes, so it was like kind of a no-brainer when we saw Zach. And it took a while to find Kirk. And we went through a lot of people, some great actors came in. It was always like, oh, maybe it'll be him. They're all really good. And then all of a sudden Chris came in and it was like, that's our guy. So we got very lucky, and April and Alyssa are tirelessly finding actors and finding people that are really just, repeatedly finding lightning in a bottle for us. Again, I hope everyone goes to see the movie, because this cast, a lot of them will be fresh faces for everybody. It will be really exciting.
It is nice to see Trek out there again, but with new faces. No offence to the other guys, but not having the same faces every single time. It's
a weird thing, and the idea, particularly with Shatner, who do we hold more, in higher regard than Shatner? I mean, he's Kirk, and the idea, unlike all these other films where there have been other James Bonds, and there has not been other Kirks. There's only been one Kirk and one Spock for 40 plus years, and the idea of Chris playing, I mean, Zach, you can see a similarity. Chris definitely didn't look like, there were similarities, particularly when Kirk was starting the movie. He was like this really good-looking, guy, and et cetera, but he doesn't look like Shatner in the same way. A young Shatner does not look like Chris, and but his personality is exactly like what Kirk is, as you guys saw in the movie, and that was it. It was like this weird thing where kind of exemplified the idea of not wanting to have him imitate any of his predecessor. It was kind of make it his own, and I think that's what he's done. So I think fans of the series would be pleasantly surprised. Particularly, there was a lot of skepticism going in about who this guy was taking Kirk. But all I remember is when I was a kid and going to see Batman, the idea of Michael Keaton playing Batman was the worst idea of all time until the day he came out as Batman. And suddenly, Batman was reborn.
Which is
And so I think what people are discovering is, even though he's not who you had in mind for Kirk, in the old versions, he suddenly is reborn as Kirk. So that's all very exciting.
All right. Well, look, we're conscious of your time, so
thank you
we'll let you go.
Thank you. Thank you guys. We're very excited. Do you ever come to the States?
Yeah, I'm actually over.
We're both over there. I'm in there in May, the first week of May, and
I get there the second week of May for a month.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm in LA on the first, second.
What are you coming for?
Well, I'm going for the Grand Slam, but I've actually that's the Creation Convention.
Is it the Star Trek Creation Convention?
Yeah, it's Creation. It's out of Malin and those guys. It's
where's it going to be?
It's in LA.
It is?
It's at the Marriott Hotel on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
May? Oh, it's right before the movie opens?
Yeah.
Oh,
but
why are we not having a screening there?
Well, surprisingly, there's no
presence?
No. The only thing they've got on the site at the moment is that.
Got to get into that.
Yeah.
Here's the problem, which is when you're under the gun, you have 4 weeks to go around the planet and get everyone into it. So I keep getting calls back from Paramount in LA saying, like, we need you back. Like, I was like, hey, let's stop over here on the way. And they're like, you must be back on this day because you have to do all the junkets that we're doing with you guys around. We haven't done one in the United States yet. So it's like 2 weeks of that, so that's all they're thinking. They're like,
what's your date for the premiere in the States?
The 30th.
Of April.
April 30th, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then,
Because one thing I'm looking forward to is I arrive on the 9th of May, and first couple of days I want to go and see the movie again in a cinema in America.
Hopefully you can't get in if we're doing our job like that.
I don't want to queue in.
Yeah.
I'll queue this time.
No, you have to come. I'm sure we'll have screenings or something, so you can come to that. Or you'll see them here. It'll be weird to see it like with an American audience too.
Well, that's what I'm looking forward to. I had a friend come over here a couple of years, wanted to see one of his movies in an Australian theatre to see the difference. And so
they should all play as well as they did last night. Have you heard about our Austin screening last night?
Yeah. The copy of Star Trek 2 that melted.
Yeah.
It was all like the whole thing. What was exciting was, part of it that came together is we wanted Leonard to come down here, but it was like a big flight and the whole thing. So then we said, what if Leonard went to Austin? And we did that instead. So it all started.
Heard a lot of people very happy about it being shown.
And the people of Vulcan are still they're still trying to get their screening, I think.
I thought they didn't have a theater. Somebody said
they were trying to get. They don't have a theater, but they were trying to get some sort of temporary thing set up. So, and I know Leonard was sort of like, "You go for it, guys."
Yeah. How good was he in the movie?
Good.
Yeah.
It's nice to see him.
It's good to see him back, and he gives it a presence.
Yes.
He gives it a legitimacy that he gave when he did the crossover with the Next Generation cast.
Right.
And he's always been, well, from a fan point of view, he's always been very good about that. And you know, he's got interests in Star Trek beyond just being Spock.
Right.
He was, post the second film, and when he took on those directing duties for the third and fourth film, and creatively he's been very involved in the franchise over the years.
Yeah.
It was good to hear that someone who had that level of investment into the franchise from that standing was associated with you guys in terms of the production, because then it said to all the fans, I think, that, well, shit, if Leonard's associated with this, it's not going to be a piece of crap. It's actually, and look, I think everyone knew the minute that JJ was associated with this film that they weren't going to get a piece of crap. But I think when it became known that Leonard was on board, the fan community just went, oh, phew, that's a good feeling.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, that was you feel nervous. You're taking on this thing. It's at ABC, one of my executive's assistant, who just emailed me to remind me that I have to get her ticket for the program. She, I talk to her every day. Okay, and she's very mild-mannered, very quiet, and she's in her 50s, and very quiet. She's great. The day it was announced that we were doing Star Trek, I called, hey, is person? She was like, I'm shaking. What? I'm shaking. I'm a closet Star Trek fan. What? Hello? And she was like, I love Star Trek forever. I'm so excited. And what you realize is, it's 40 years, okay? There's so many fans that are all over the place, a lot of whom had, as you said last night, they kind of abandoned it after the original one, when they went under the other ones, and then this, and so it was really the idea is that we could make it appeal to all of those people who had come before, and really kind of bring everyone back. And one person who saw it last night, Carl Urban's agent, coincidentally, is a huge Star Trek fan. We got on the plane. She's from America. She's like, I've seen every episode. I know them like the back of my hand. And she hadn't seen the movie. And she was like, I like this and da-da. And she was like referencing. And remember, I don't know anything. Okay? So I'm just nodding as if I know what the hell she's talking about. And she's going, I know this, and I love this, and the original ones, I grew up with those, and then Next Generation I love, and da-da-da. And she was going on and on and on. And she came out of the movie last night, and she was like, my kids are going to now understand it. They're going to go back and watch all the originals. She says, all this does is make me want to go back and watch the other ones. So hopefully, and that's what happened to me, because again, not having known working on it, I've now started going back and watching, the original series, which I didn't know, and it's a whole new appreciation of what they were doing.
The biggest thing for me in terms of the film and the story itself, and I'm not going to speak for other Star Trek fans because I think I've been using that quite a bit today, but for myself, Star Trek stopped surprising me probably 7 or 8 years ago. It stopped surprising me in terms of the storytelling. And the great thing about last night is that for the first time in a very long time, something with Star Trek in the name actually surprised me from a storytelling point of view. And I think any good story does have to have some element of surprise in it for me.
Yeah.
And it did that. It surprised me.
That's great. That's fire. You know, again, in defense of everyone, even going back to Gene Roddenberry, everyone, it's always just about, you know, your finances and whether or not your studio is behind and understands it. And it felt like even all the people that came after Gene and everyone who were telling incredible stories. Like, I keep running into those writers now. A lot of them are TV writers, and they're geniuses. But you're always limited by how much money you can spend and this and your audience. And there was always this feeling that Star Trek was for, from the studio's point of view, it was for them, whoever those people might be, okay, Star Trek fans. Because they weren't. The studio wasn't. And even in this case, the studio, obviously Paramount, they appreciated Star Trek, but they didn't know, you know, there'd been 10 films before, and they'd been like The Cleaning, whatever, and this whole new team of people at Paramount, all the way from Brad Gray and Bob Moore and John Lesher and Brad Weston, all of them, they were literally they all came together and they said, boldly go, okay, and go make it, and here it is, and we're going to spend more than we have before, and we're going to give you those things, and we're going to make it a real film. So they really allowed the film to give it the best effort, because it was always something. I used to always point out that there were the same amount of Star Trek films as there were Friday the 13th, and it always felt like it was like one of those franchises that they would just do was for that audience, whoever those people were that liked to watch those movies, and Gene, and again, all of his showrunners who came after him, they were incredible characters, and they were great worlds. And I discovered this all recently because I wasn't watching. You go back and you watch those stories, and they're incredible. I mean, the best ones are as good as television gets, or any medium for that matter. And they're ambiguous, and they're great, and the characters are like moving and tragic and everything you want it to be. But they were always limited by limitations in technology, which, aka, you don't have the money to do it right, or whatever it may be, and just you're limited by things. And it's just amazing how many great hours of television came out of that franchise, and that when we stepped in, there was no more. Television was over, and there were no features, and it just felt like it's too good of a universe to let it just die. So.
Well, doesn't look like it's going to.
No. Thank you.
We're knocking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.